refrain from doing that because, the Constitution of South Africa guarantees everyone within its borders to have access to basic health care. Let's actually get to speak to someone who works very closely with these, clinics that are.
So Newsroom Afrika, they had a segment that to do with Dudula and the clinic. And people made some comments, as you can see. So this is just a snippet of a few comments. This is for educational purposes only. So we're looking at what we do when we analyze social media comments. So we look at the themes, we look at the sentiment, we look at rhetorical tactics, we also look at the risk and misinformation. Risk, it's around, you could classify misinformation as also around the risk as well. So the hate speech, it's risk. The call for violence is also risk in commentary, and the misinformation is also risk. That is what we do when we look at social media, comments that people make, and then we analyze them, put them together to see if we see common themes. Then we compare and contrast as well. So we can see that a lot of in this segment of Newsroom Afrika that's specific around this issue of healthcare access. So there is definitely around a patriotic theme that's emerging, and I've seen this emerge a lot in South African contexts around. Many people argue that the public clinics, schools, and social services are overstretched and should first serve the South African citizens who pay tax, which is something that many people would say even here in Australia. Okay, so for example, there were comments around people are not denied access, just denied to use public services that we pay tax for. Because the public services in South Africa, it's equity-based services. Most people who work, they are encouraged to have private health care insurance. Most workers have, even the employer, it's like the same as America. You have a private health system, you have to have your insurance. But the equity base is the one that's it's mainly in the Black community, and people, women and young children are not supposed to pay. It's free for them to access those equity-based public services in South Africa. But private, you pay because you have a private insurance, then you pay for it. So this one is they just the example. These ones are more around saying that people they're not denied access. They have access in private. In this case, it's alleged that the child went to the private clinic and subsequently died there. Those are allegations, but Newsroom Afrika is alleging that Dudula is to be blamed. So there's also a patriotic framing. This isn't hatred of outsider, but a defense of scarce resources for citizens. It reflects a common belief that patriotism means safeguarding the welfare of fellow South Africans and those who are marginalized in South Africa. So that is a common theme that I found. The second theme that I looked at, that I found in this segment, with demanding accountability from government and institutions. There's a common sentiment among South Africans of frustrations that the state, the police, and the media aren't protecting South Africans. The supporters feel citizens must step in where the government has failed. An example, we see this one in the comments where people say, if the government were doing their job, they wouldn't have a problem. They blame ANC, the EFF, and Home Affairs, not South African people. So that's what it. So this is another this patriotic framing. These comments they reflect the civic patriotism anger at government negligence, and also insistence that the state institutions must prioritize their own citizens, their own people. So that is what I've seen lately. There's a that yeah, kind of like that patriotism, kind of that sentiment that we saw in America around America First. That was, yes, I've been seeing that emerge in South Africa. Now the third one is the fairness and reciprocity and national sovereignty in this segment. So they're also around many. Have we're talking about around a South African who was in an accident in Zimbabwe, who was denied healthcare in Zimbabwe and had to be airlifted to South Africa. So there's common, you see this comment say, if we go to their countries, we pay for hospitals. Why is it different here? These are actually are very common. We've seen this theme many times. This one, fairness, reciprocity, and national sovereignty. We've seen this one. So we've classified this one as a theme around fairness, reciprocity, and national sovereignty. It's a very common theme around South Africa. So these are the top three. Every time when I analyze the South African media around what people are saying, it's these top three. And then, so this is really about, it reflects people who have, national pride and sovereignty. And South Africans want their country to act like other nations do, protecting their own citizens first. So there is actually another connection to Dudula and ATM, Africa Transformation Movement. So we know that Dudula has issued a statement denying blocking medical care, but still stressed that its mission of prioritizing South Africans are, and defending dignity. Their official statement fits within the resource protection and accountability theme. So now ATM, Africa Transformation Movement leader Vuyo Zingula, frames South African Human Rights Commission as failing South Africans by being silent on poisoning food. And I think I told you the story of Naledi Chiren, who died after eating poisonous food that they bought from illegal foreigners plaza shop in South Africa. So he is saying that on poison, the South African Human Rights Commissioner failed South Africans because they were silent at the time when the kids were poisoned in this illegal plaza shop run by illegal foreigners in South Africa. So he talks about it in this letter, illegal plaza shops and biased leadership. So the language is more legalistic but aligned with accountability and sovereignty themes. So I've seen these sovereignty themes come around, even action essay, their language is around sovereignty themes, but it's more around, around making sure there's budget for everything. Now, when we combine both the narrative for Dudula and ATM and also some comments that South Africans made, we found that South Africans, they all express that the South Africans must come first in the allocation of state resources. And there's also institutions like the government and South African Human Rights Commissioner, the media, they're blaming all these institutions. And that one has been common all throughout, that the South African Human Rights Commission doesn't have a lot of respect in South Africa, and we've seen that a lot. Every time when they come out, X is on fire, and the comments are overwhelmingly negative. So they actually are blaming the media also for failing to defend citizens. There's true patriotism that's emerging here in this theme that means that holding leaders accountable and safeguarding national sovereignty. So the really key insight around this is that the ordinary commenter express patriotism as resource protection, fairness, and frustration with weak institutions. And Dudula channels that patriotism into grassroots mobilization, as they've done. The also ATM, which is the member of the parliament, this one they have seats in parliament. They formalize it in the parliament by actually using constitutional and legal language. Together, all these things, the Dudula supporter, the commentary, and the Dudula themselves and ATM, they represent different levels of patriotism activism. The street level around what people are saying in this newsroom story, and the movement and also institution, but they are rooted in the same thing. Okay, they don't really neatly fit into what media in Australia would call it, or racism, or white nationalist, and in South Africa call it xenophobia. So you don't get that a fitting, a perfect fit. So they see the commentary, they actually sits a broader right versus left ideological framing. Okay, so what I mean is that the right, which is around conservative, patriotic, nationalistic framing, the core belief of the right is that the nation must put its own citizen first. And we can see this comes over and over in South Africa, this right leaning framing very much. And it became, I saw that this before last year's election, South Africa's election, this framing. Uh, it actually shows that in the comments that people make around these issues around healthcare access for illegal immigrants, like clinics are for South Africans, we pay tax. If we go to Zimbabwe, we must pay. So why not here? So there's a overwhelming support for Dudula, Operation Dudula, as a grassroots defense of sovereignty. So how it shows in Australia, we saw this around calls to secure borders, around the stop a lot of influx of illegal immigrants in Australia around the boats, stop the boats, and also we're seeing it now around the housing crisis that we have here in Australia, prioritizing Aussies for housing and for jobs. There's also another issue around patriotic themes as well. We're seeing this as well, common themes around fairness is equal, protecting insiders before outsider, and it comes in both countries, in Australia and also in South Africa, around protecting the fairness, protecting the insiders before the outsiders. So then you go to another, the lefty part of it, yeah, the progressive human rights and globalist framing. So the core beliefs, you see this one around human dignity and rights applied to everyone regardless of nationality. Even with this interview, you hear the person, the interviewer, speaking about the access to health care for everyone, but also picking that one and actually not actually completing it, but actually that access comes with responsibility, meaning that you need to be able to have your own private health care to support it. So but they kind of like mentioning the constitution, those rights, but those rights come with responsibility. And the responsibility is that if you're migrants, you should have a private health insurance if you're in South Africa, and so on, because it's not for everyone that gets to have access to free public health care. All right, so you hear this, this rights being expressed in the media in South Africa, and a lot of these media express this thing, and yeah, citizens are really yelling at them lately. I haven't had any medias in South Africa because that when they speak, that I'd say that people support them, especially the mainstream, because they all are lefty. Now you get there are also these minority voices like human life is more important than a paper, um, and there's some using hash words like this is meta. There's also concerns about cruelty and erosion of humanity. So how it shows also in Australia is that advocating, you can see here people last in a few weeks ago played a story where people who came in Australia illegally are not going to be resettled in Australia. They will be resettled elsewhere. and there was an agreement. Australian government had an agreement with another country that it would pay money for them to be resettled there, not in Australia. So the refugee group came out and they were advocating for refugee rights. There were also multiculturalism theme you hear often in Australia, and also humanitarian intake as well. You hear this theme. This theme you also hear in South Africa as well. But then you have also this patriotic theme that it appears as well in both South Africa and Australia. True patriotism equals to living up to, in South Africa, they use a lot of living up to constitution and moral values of equality and compassion. In Australia, it keeps to around Australia affairs and prioritizing Australians. Now you have the middle blended space when I think many South Africans and Australians don't really fully identify with the left or right, where in this segment they say things like, yes, foreigners deserve respect, but government must protect South Africans first. Yeah, the same thing you hear around housing. Government must actually, try to provide support for Australians around housing. This is a centric patriotism where balancing their rights with responsibility. So, when we're talking about reciprocity, we're talking about if I come to your home, how you treating me, and you should treat me the way I treat you. And many South Africans don't feel when they go to these countries they're getting treated better, and they often have to pay for everything, and they don't understand why the government is insisting on having these people getting access to their public health care for free. Now you got Dudula and ATM in this frame. So the Dudula leaderships, of course, they've been speaking in always patriotic language like sovereignty protections, but also softens with the humanitarian disclaimers like they respect life, they never denied any emergency care. Now you got the Dudula supporters, mostly right populist patriotisms, resources protections, accountability. Again, the theme of reciprocity continues well. The ATM sort of leaning towards institutional patriotism because they're in parliament, so using constitutional law to argue for citizens first. In this letter that they've issued against the South African Human Rights Commission. So it also shows that South Africa are not passive. They are choosing ideological language. These ideological languages they're choosing, some are right, so around protection, some are left around human dignity, many in between. And this, when I look at this Newsroom Afrika, but also when I look at other Australian segments, when I listen to other themes, you can hear the comment section. Where in Australia, when there was a lot of boats, you had a lot of stop the boats. It's right. There's also another less theme around refugee welcome with the lefties. And you have to also run fixed houses for locals first, which is more centric patriotism. Centric patriotism is, I would say, you see it commonly in South Africa, and you see it here in Australia as well. So South Africa, yes, are leaning to the right in both sense. They're leaning to the right, and this is important when it comes to politics. So it looks like all of these lefties, I don't see them winning. I don't see any lefty succeeding. Okay, so they in most comments that we've done, a lot of analysis around people, what the common themes that they're saying around particular topic, we're seeing a lot of shifting to the right side. And the right is, of course, your action essay, center right action essay. You got populist right, Dudula and Patriotic Alliance, March on March. You got March on March is not a political party, but you also have Patriotic Alliance. You've got ATM as well. ATM, I would say, is more centric. It's more center right. It's not a hardline right. But yeah, there's a lot of right leaning, and in South Africa, the political ideology, it's actually changing. It's really moving, it's shifting the ground. Okay, so I don't know, and all of these people who are out there, the DA has actually collaborated with EFF against Dudula, because Dudula is the new kids on the block. Watch out. Operation Dudula, yeah, because they can see it, because we can see it in our data too, that Dudula, Dudula is going to obliterate them next year in the local election. So watch this space. Anyway, thank you guys for listening. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. Until next time, see ya.